Hi there, it's Jane from Love Your Lens, and I'm here now to talk you through the images that were submitted for the July theme of texture. And as ever, there were an incredible amount of images and some really, really good ones amongst them. So it's always hard to pick. So I thought it might be interesting for you to know what's in my mind, perhaps in a little bit more detail, when I'm looking through the pictures, what I'm looking for and what makes me reject some and pick out others. You may have heard me or seen me mention the Love Your Lens Academy from time to time, and it's basically a boot camp where people who want to move their photography up a gear, or perhaps who are a little bit stuck and want to focus on it in a much more deeper way and get really good feedback from me, lots of encouragement, lots of ideas. So it's a paid group. It's £40 a month, and there's lots of things that go on to make it really good value for money and help people really move forward. But one of the most important elements of it is the detailed critique that I give to people on their images. So this is the scorecard that I've developed for the Academy, and basically it's just so that people can get an idea over time of where they are perhaps making mistakes, where their weaknesses are and where their strengths are. And the idea, of course, is that they eventually move across in as many areas as possible to those high scores of 6 and 7. So the sorts of areas that I'm marking them on are the accuracy of their focusing, have they got the exposure right for the mood and feel of the picture, have they used an appropriate shutter speed, have they used a good aperture, what's the composition like, is it really strong, is there an emotional connection? Now this is that wow moment, this is that thing that makes you stop in your tracks and really connect with an image. Does it make you laugh? Did it make you feel sad? Is it breathtakingly beautiful, etc.? Really, if an image hasn't got that, it's not making you stop and connect in some way, it really is not much more than a quick snapshot. So that score's really important to everybody. And then there's the storytelling element. Not all pictures tell a story, but if they can tell a simple story and have some context and suggest something is going on, maybe something's going on outside of the frame, etc., then again, an image will have more impact and stay with you for longer. And then we look at how the image has been edited. Was it edited appropriately? Could it have done with more editing? Was it edited inappropriately, so it's just too extreme? And then the final thing is the use of light. Now, you know, as we go through, and I'll pick out certain images and talk about where the light is absolutely fantastic and has really helped the image. My favourite image this month, for instance, one of the things, the aspects that it really works on is the light that's used in it. So people in the Academy know that a 7 is extremely hard to achieve. A 7 is absolutely outstanding, and I've only given a couple on one image so far. 4 is good. 4, you know, so people are aiming for 4 and above. 5 is very good, 6 is excellent, 7 is outstanding. Below a 4 gives people an idea of where they should be working. So when I'm looking through your images, I've got exactly all of these same things going on in my mind. So if I see quite often within the group that people have spotted a great shot, they've got fantastic ideas, but it's how it's executed that doesn't always work. It's not followed through. So if you see something that's amazing and it really catches your eye, how can you create a really strong shot from it? And a lot of the time it's going back to those basics that really are listed there on the image critique scorecard. So quite often one of the big mistakes is the image is too cluttered, so the composition isn't strong, the exposure's not right, the focus isn't sharp. and it's not, people perhaps haven't used the best angle for framing, or the light is just not really very interesting and flat. If you've got really flat light, you've got to have a really strong subject to get over that. You know, we often have days where the light is very even, but if you've shot something that's a really strong subject, really strong story, then you can get away with that. Whereas you can sometimes shoot a really mundane subject, but the light is amazing and it lifts that picture from mundane to really quite impressive. So that's the scorecard. Yeah, that'll perhaps help you understand why I've rejected, or not rejected, but, you know, passed over quite a lot of images to come to this final selection. The other thing I've done this month is only choose one image per person, because sometimes people will submit a range of images and they're all very strong, and I end up including 2, 3 or 4 from one particular person. So from now on I'm only going to pick what I think is the strongest and most suitable for the theme from each person. So Alan, as we know, is a great photographer, submits some beautiful images, and it was no different for texture. So the one that I've gone for in the end is this waterfall, beautiful colours, beautifully frozen in motion, and it's the texture that he's caught by not blurring the water using a slow shutter speed but going for a fast one instead. There's a real feel of the power of that water, and it's very, very photogenic and very striking to look at. And of course his exposure is really strong, his composition is good, so you know, technically it's there, but also it has that feeling of, whoa, look at that water, it just looks magnificent. Then we have this really striking image by Alison Bailey, entitled Bullseye. And you know, yes, it's very impressive, Alison, that you've caught the eye like that, and the expression on his face. I mean, you know, I'm kind of like shaking in my boots here. That's a real hard glare from a bull, isn't it? I wouldn't want to be too close to it. So I hope you had a long lens on, or you know him and he's actually quite a friendly bull. So yeah, lots of lovely texture in there. I mean, one of the things I do if I really like an image, but there's a couple of things that could be improved upon, is I'll pull out that as well. So the exposure was pretty tricky here, because you've got some very dark areas of the bull, and you've also got this white forelock, or whatever you call it. So with those conditions, you're either potentially going to underexpose or overexpose on those bright and dark areas. So what's happened here is the majority of the image is darker, particularly the sort of area on the left hand side, and the camera has exposed more for those dark areas and left this right hand side quite overexposed. So to sort that out, Alison, what you really need to do is expose for those brightest areas. So what that would mean is you would make the picture overall darker, so that your lightest areas are not overexposed, and then when you come to edit the picture later, you can lighten the shadows. That's all doable in Snapseed. I don't know what you edit with, Alison, so you might be in Photoshop, Lightroom, whatever, but you can lift shadows afterwards, so try not to overexpose those highlights. But a very powerful image, and you know, well worthy of being included in this selection for texture. Look at those eyelashes. I mean, they're amazing. It's that expression, that steely gaze, that I think really you know, makes that image. There are a number of images that have been submitted where there's a natural texture on a man-made texture, and that kind of juxtaposition and contrast works really, really well. But Chris has gone another step beyond that here, where he's got a round form on a very linear form, all those straight lines and repeating patterns. On top of that, the round form is arresting. It's the detail on it is fascinating, so that makes you want to look at it, and it's on this perfect contrasting man-made background. And then turning it into black and white, and the editing, well, it's kind of black and white, isn't it? It's kind of got a sort of a warmth and colour about the fungus. So the editing is very clever and brings out all of that. So you know, in the position of the lichen or fungus, whatever it is, on that left hand side, with that line going straight down it as well, but also then including the area on the right is absolutely spot on, Chris, and that's a really strong image. And following on there from the image by Chris, this image by Jill, very, very similar kind of reason why it works, because you've got the beauty of this this creature, nature's creature, the butterfly, and then you've got it sat on a man-made structure, and it's a man-made structure that is full of repeating patterns. There's nothing there to distract and pull away from the butterfly. It just contrasts beautifully. So lovely composition, filling the frame, and the contrast of those beautiful colours, the textures on that butterfly against the hard texture of that frame. So again, I've not really said this yet, but obviously the theme was texture, and it's those images where you really feel like texture is the main point of the image, and that also at times you feel like you could just reach out and touch those textures. So really great shot there, Jill. Then we've got this shot of fungus by Helen, and there were quite a few shots of fungus this month actually. I think we've got an abundance of it because it was very, very warm, followed by very, very wet weather, wasn't it? I mean, we've had mushrooms and toadstools growing in our garden, and it's an odd time of year for them to appear. I think I really like the composition and the editing in this image. There's just something a bit different to it than just your standard sort of shot of fungus. So the eye kind of starts at the front and then kind of leads off through towards the back, where you've got this beautiful woodland. And I love the way you've edited it, Helen. There's a really nice feel to it. It's quite rich. There's a feel of abundance, and again, it meets the brief spot on for texture. So yeah, really strong image again, Helen. This is a good example of what I was talking about at the beginning, where maybe the light isn't amazing because it's fairly sort of even, almost quite flat light, but the subject itself is arresting enough that there's a picture there. So I mean, this flower is just so unusual, isn't it? And obviously, you know, the textures on it, and what's fascinating is this whirl of yellow stamens on the top. So you know, absolutely ideal subject for texture, good framing, nothing distracting there. The only thing I think lets it down slightly, Jay, is I feel as if it needs lifting a little bit with a bit of editing, just a little bit more punch that would bring out those textures a little bit more, the contrast a little bit more as well, and maybe a tiny bit of sharpening. It's minuscule, but these things do make a difference, and it's well worth stopping and editing, you know, when you've got a really great shot like that. So really love it. This shot by Catherine Hall has got that factor, hasn't it? That we see baby creatures, baby animals, and they're adorable, fascinating, and baby elephants are wonderful, aren't they? But obviously this one is just fab because he's been rolling in the mud. So many different textures on him. I mean, that's not his natural texture there, is it? He's absolutely covered in dust and mud, with just that tiny bit on his back that shows you what his real coat or skin looks like. And then you've got the texture of the sand, that he's enjoying the texture. I think that's what's really good about this. He's rubbing himself up and down that texture, and you can kind of feel that pleasure that he's getting from that. And then you've got the lovely textures in the background as well. So it's all sort of the same palette. Even the fence at the back is kind of echoing some of the tones of the elephant. So it's all about that overall feel of the image as well. There's nothing jarring in there. There's not suddenly a red bucket or, you know, a bit of green grass or whatever that would distract you from that shot. It's just all about those lovely colours, the textures, and that story of that elephant enjoying itself. Great shot, Catherine. Some more fascinating fungus here from Kelly B. And now this one is all about the light, the way that the light has caught this fungus and is sort of lighting up the inside of it as well as the outside. And it's I said there's a lot of fungus pictures, but the ones that I've picked I think really jump out at you. So the colours of this are fantastic. The folds of it, it looks fleshy and soft. So again, it's that that feeling that you can imagine what the textures are on this. I mean, I'm not saying particularly I would want to touch it. I'm a bit squeamish about things like that, but I can imagine what it feels like. And I like Kelly's work because she has got a style about her where she processes her images quite strongly, but it works and it's her identifiable style. It brings out the colours and it brings out the textures. So little bits of grass across it are a little bit distracting. You could potentially edit out those bottom 3 blades, Kelly, but you know, I know it's you know, sometimes it's just not worth the effort, is it? But anyway, it doesn't really detract from the image, just a minor point. So I really like that one. There's a number of things about this image. It's a very clever spot by Lauren, and clever framing and everything. It's the different textures in this image. So again, we've got old and new textures, you know, and we've got glass and we've got steel and we've got tile and we've got brick. And then it's, of course, it's all about those leading lines and strong triangles and shapes that make this a very strong image, and very arresting to look at. Your eye goes up the steps and straight up that steep building. So lovely angle, well executed, right choice of lens and everything, Lauren. Wouldn't be surprised to hear it's been shot on a phone, because phones are wide angle and can achieve that kind of effect. And of course, absolutely right to put it into black and white to really emphasize all those lines and different textures within the shot. Lisa, what a great shot. Your eye goes straight to that tongue. I mean, we know about cats' tongues and we're told how rough they are. And if you've not had a cat and don't realise, I mean, this just tells you, doesn't it? It is like one of those sponges that you get to kind of really scrub at things, you know, and they need them for the grooming and everything. And you've caught the cat's expression brilliantly. It is really enjoying that grooming. It is perfectly sharp. The depth of field is beautiful, and the only reason this isn't my favourite this month is because the one that I've chosen, the light is stunning, and there's a well, you'll see when I get to it, but Lisa, honestly, I was there going hither and thither between the 2 images of, do I pick this one or do I pick that one? So I just wanted to let you know that, because I really did love this shot. That tongue, I keep going back to it thinking it is amazing. Clever shot. I think what I really liked about this shot by Louise is the colour. It's just such a beautiful colour, and there's you know, different tones of it. It fills the frame, but also then these droplets of water that make that leaf almost look like leather, or something, instead of just a leaf. And I think that's what it is really. There's just something very, very pleasing about it. Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's the colour and the kind of the way the textures are being played with the water on them. And again, I think what's been interesting this month is, since we did the square theme, have you noticed how many images have been square for this particular challenge as well? And I'm glad to see that people are stopping and thinking about what is the best framing for a particular shot. And you know, we talked about square, didn't we? And we said how the eyes can't wander from side to side or up and down. It's all very much about what's going on in the center of the image, and this framing is just right, Louise. Oh, we've had an abundance of dogs this month, haven't we? I mean, we're all feel as if we know Chip, Alan's dog, and then this beautiful pup, or, well, he's probably not a pup, is he, Melanie? But we could still call our dogs puppies, even though they're 8 now. So yeah, wonderful textures here. I mean, I don't normally like this kind of, I want to call it over processing, but it isn't. It's just a different style of processing. So I normally find it a bit full on, but I think the way that it is really brought out the textures of his fur, of his nose, and of that sand, and the fact there's a bit of a story there where you know what this dog has been doing and how much enjoyment he's had from it. And you know, then he's gone back to his owner as if to say, what are you looking at? So yeah, a strong image with, you know, very simple, but then that lovely story and all that feeling of textures from it as well. So nice one, Melanie. Well, the first word you think of when you look at this image is ouch. You know, how spiky is that, and what does it actually feel like when you touch it, and how did that ladybird kind of like get in there, and not get damaged by it? So very similar in some respects, Ray, to the picture that you know, was our favourite for last month, which was Square, wasn't it? With all those spines radiating out from the centre, which are fascinating in their own right. But then we have this splash of colour in the form of the ladybird, and also a different texture, so a hard shell texture against all that that spiky green, and also red and green works so well together as a colour palette opposite each other on the colour wheel, and that's another thing that makes this image work and feel right. And again, the square format is just absolutely spot on. And there's another insect at the top there, I think, as well, isn't there, Ray? But yeah, isn't nature fascinating? That structure. Yeah, this image by Sheena. That leaf on its own is fairly fascinating, you know, the way that it's been eaten away, and then Sheena's told us the story of the beetle, which we might not have spotted had she not pointed it out. So, you know, yes, the leaf is an attractive subject, but what I really think makes this work is then Sheena's made it into more of a story by having a child's hand holding it up to inspect it as well. So suddenly it becomes not just a shot of a leaf, but it's got a little bit more to it. It's a story. A child has found that fascinating, which is great. You know, we want our kids to be interested in nature, don't we? Potentially difficult exposure. Well, you've nailed it, Sheena. I don't know whether you had to do a lot of editing, whether you shot it on a phone, whatever. However you've achieved it, the sky's not blown out, the leaf's perfectly exposed, the hand's well exposed, nice depth of field, great composition. So ticks all those boxes that I was talking about at the beginning. Well done. This shot from Tina Cook that was taken on our lovely Birds of Prey evening. The texture, that's why I've picked this one out, because the textures of the feathers are so beautiful, but I've also picked it out, Tina, for a bit of a learning thing as well here. It's not quite as strong as it could be because of the depth of field here. I think if it had had a smaller aperture, and we'd have been able to get the owl's face in focus as a whole, so beak and eyes, and you know, one eye slightly softer than the other, and the feathers that are nearest the lens on his brow almost are out of focus, as is the nose because that's nearest. So go back and look at your settings for this one, Tina. And I know everything was moving really quickly that evening. 1 minute we were, you know, photographing from a distance, things in the sky, things posing near us. But I think next time you get a chance to do this, just use that higher F number, go for F11 or something, or F8. This bird was posing, so you didn't need, you know, you wouldn't have been worrying about fast shutter speed and high ISO. So I mean, I love the textures in it. I love his eyes, and the colours are fantastic, and that framing of an owl's face is great. But just look at, you know, using slightly different F numbers. I hope you don't mind me saying that, Tina. It's just, you know, it's a good lesson for everybody. Yeah, this one, Vicky, really, really like it. But then I was thinking to myself, why do we like it so much? Basically, it's a door, it's a bit of wood, and you know, we go around and we see loads of lovely textures like this. But what is it that then kind of makes this one really, really work and stronger than some of the others? And I came to the conclusion it's because it's got layers and it's got so much interest to it. So it's got the layer beneath, and then which is obviously horizontal planks. Then you've got the vertical, very, very aged planks on top. I love the framing. I did see the shot of the original door, and it is fascinating. But I love the bit that you've picked out. And then it's the colours and the bolts and things within it as well. So you've got all that grey and all the textures within that grey, but then you've got all the rusted areas as well. So all that sort of warmer orangey colours running through it as well. Nothing else to distract the eye. Your focal point is arguably the hinge, isn't it? The rusted hinge. But then I also like the kind of the central area of that big main plank with the hole in it as well. So really strong image. Possibly a little bit of editing, just to bring out those textures a little bit more. The lighting's bright. It looks like it's been shot in fairly strong sunshine, which is great. I mean, it's, you know, it's worked well. You've not got any heavy shadows or bleached areas or anything, but I just feel like perhaps a little bit with that texture tool in Lightroom, and just take the exposure down a slight tad, and then bring up the contrast a little bit. But that's always quite personal, isn't it? But that's kind of what I would do to that. So out of all those very strong images submitted, this is my favourite, and this did make me do that wow reaction to it. So we're talking the theme of texture. So straight away we've got the fur of this dog. She's buried her hands in it, and that's what you want to do, isn't it? You want to bury your hands into that texture. So we've got beautiful texture, but there's so much more going on with this image. We've got an amazing bond between owner and dog, and just that glimpse of Julia, and the way she set this up as well on a tripod. I mean, that's by the by really, but to have that story behind of how she achieved the shot is fascinating as well. So you know, she's got the glimpse of her, just enough to have that story of that love and that bond between the dog. The dog is absolutely loving having that attention. Julia is loving giving that attention. And then, as I said, when I looked at Lisa's image of the cat, which was superb, but it was the light in this image that really made it for me as well. And I guess the story as well of that emotional bond was there as well. So really cracking image. Julia might just be slightly overexposed in areas. So this image I would probably give a 7, one of those rare 7s for that emotional connection reaction, but then I might mark it down slightly on exposure, because I've got a feeling on your wrists and maybe on some slight areas on the dog Luna there may be some slightly overexposed areas. But really strong shot, Julia, well worth all that messing about with the tripod and everything to get it. So I hope you've enjoyed the slideshow. Thank you very much for listening, for submitting, and keep on submitting those images for this month's theme of repetition. Already seeing some really good ones, and it's again, looks like a theme that you're really enjoying. And I've got some to put on for it as well that I've just taken over the last couple of days, and I'm off on my jollies tomorrow down south to Cornwall, and I'm sure that there'll be lots of opportunity to post some pictures from there as well. So be safe, and I'll speak to you soon.